Welcome to the African Alliance podcast, the Brilliant series, brought to you by the Brilliant Consortium's Community Engagement and Advocacy Workstream. This series introduces you to the scientists, researchers, and community activists driving innovation and social progress across our partner sites. In each episode, we'll hear from those in the front lines, whether they're uncovering groundbreaking scientific discoveries or working to empower communities through grassroots activism. These conversations give you an inside look at how collaboration between science and community is transforming lives, challenging systems, and creating solutions that can change the world. Today, I'm speaking to the Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation's Dr. Yashna Singh. So Yashna, on this podcast, thank you so much, firstly, for taking time to join us and have a discussion about Brilliant. And of course, part of these discussions is really unpacking Brilliant and what Brilliant is. And, it's been a year, just over a year since the award and since the announcement of this groundbreaking, first in Africa, African women-led HIV vaccine discovery kind of endeavor across 8 countries in Africa, over $40 million grant partnership. And I'm really keen to understand, what is your current role at the foundation, firstly, and then secondly, in the context of Brilliant?
So I've worked at the Desmond Tutu Foundation for 8 years now, and I'm an investigator on a number of really exciting, innovative HIV treatment and prevention studies and a few TB vaccine preventative efforts, and previously COVID trials when the pandemic was a raging pandemic. So our role at the DTHF is conducting these clinical trials, and I think my passion and understanding of this work grows every year. We see participants on our trials, and it is our duty to ensure that the benefit of their participation outweighs the risks of the study. And over and above conducting the trial in a precise manner and collecting clean data, our responsibility mainly lies in ensuring the safety and the well-being of our participants. And through the work that we do, I have gained a deeper understanding of especially the psychosocial aspects of HIV, including the stigma patients face and the importance of mental health and emotional support as part of comprehensive care. In fact, we do have a psychologist and a social worker on site because we have learned that these services are often not readily available to our patients in the public health sector.
And your specific role within the Brilliant Consortium?
So as part of the Brilliant Consortium, which we are very excited to be a part of, just one of 2 South African sites, we have submitted our feasibility and approval for assessment with our ethics committee at the University of Cape Town. So we're eagerly awaiting feedback from them. And my job on the trial would be to continue the clinical care of our research trial participants as one of the sub-investigators at our site.
You said you've been at Desmond Tutu for 8 years now. Obviously, a lot of learnings, a lot of experiences with regards to, how research happens and how communities and participants experience this whole, research endeavor. We're increasingly seeing communities who take part in research, certainly during COVID. One remembers when you had mainly African folks who had participated in research, looking at their screens and seeing folks in the global north getting vaccinated before we ever, got vaccines. And so it was kind of a reminder just really of the injustice of how global health works. And so, of course, we've recently had headlines around this wonder discovery, lenacapavir, and what it means, potentially for the trajectory of HIV in our lifetimes. You're seeing so many of these exciting developments, but at least in recent history, you're seeing countries and communities that take part in research not having access to the fruits of that research. And, you know, certainly for nearly 2 decades now, we've been calling for meaningful post-trial access, meaningful post-trial access. When you look at what is happening around us when it comes to scientific and research developments, what would your message be to communities when we want them, of course, to continue supporting research? But why should communities continue supporting research when, in so many cases in recent history, they're not able to access the fruits of that research? Why should communities continue supporting endeavors like the Brilliant Consortium's work?
So, bearing in mind that there has been inequity in access to groundbreaking, innovative technologies in HIV prevention treatment, and this has been a historical situation, we need to keep advocating for early access to these technologies, for example, lenacapavir, and also bearing in mind, as you've mentioned, during the pandemic where the people in the global north and in higher income countries were unfairly given these vaccines prior to people in so-called low to middle income, low resource setting countries. Even though we have the experience in large scale or implementing large scale programs, for example, our HIV ART program in South Africa is the biggest in the world, and we have such experience in providing for this and implementing and dispensing vaccines and ART to the people who need it the most. As long as we have a voice and as long as community members and advocacy groups continue, such as the treatment action campaign back when the epidemic was really doing a lot of damage to the people in our country, as long as we remember that and we know that we can make a difference in our communities, and then that is the will behind it and the force that we need to continue on this trajectory. This is part of why the Brilliant Consortium itself is so groundbreaking, as you mentioned, and so exciting, because we have a team of African scientists who, it speaks to the adage, nothing about us without us. And I think that is the primary focus that we have to keep, bearing in mind to advance technologies within the HIV struggle.
So one more question. Around your 8 years, what would you say is one of the biggest lessons you've learned when it comes to human beings, engaging with human beings in the context of clinical research? What's the one thing that sits on your heart and has perhaps sat on your heart for many years, that drives you, that guides you, that keeps you on track and keeps you honest when it comes to your engagement with the diversity of human beings who take part in clinical trials?
I think one of the most important things in being a clinical researcher is to remember that it is a slow process, right? From assessing the feasibility of a study, looking at the risk-benefit analysis and study startup, to getting our participants enrolled and caring for them every step of the way. It is our duty to make sure that participants understand what the study is about, understand their risks and the benefits of participation, and also to communicate the outcomes of the trial with them and translating the science and giving feedback to our participants and working with our community advisory boards and our advocacy groups and stakeholders, getting their input into every step of the research trials until eventually transforming the policies and in our country in terms of HIV treatment and prevention, and getting these much needed new innovative therapies to the rest of the South African population. I've been fortunate to be involved in very interesting phase 1 trials, and which investigate new compounds like broadly neutralizing antibodies and new vaccine candidates, and new PrEP trials, new treatment trials. And from the concept of the study to the outcomes of research, as I've mentioned, it is really important to have input from people where this engage with people who know the landscape of the epidemic, who know the social determinants of this illness, and how to approach this without the lens of researchers in the global north.
This is the Brilliant series of podcasts, brought to you by the Consortium's Community Engagement and Advocacy Workstream, introducing you to the scientists, researchers, and community activists at the center of HIV vaccine discovery. Today, I'm speaking to Dr. Yashna Singh from the Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation. Yashna, for the South Africans at least who are listening, what practically will happen in South Africa around Brilliant? Could you describe what is practically going to happen? Are we going to issue an open call for everyone to come along to the site and sign up for this trial? How will it work? Could you give us a brief overview or a snapshot of what is going to happen in South Africa when it comes to the Brilliant sites?
First, we would, at our site in particular, we engage with our community advisory board. So the site lead would have a meeting with them, and this engagement is an ongoing process. And we will gain their valuable input into whether this is feasible and whether this is going to lead to equitable access to the vaccine, should it be effective and safe and well tolerated in participants. Once we have that in place, our University of Cape Town Human Research Ethics Board will hopefully approve the protocol. And once that is done, our site staff will be trained, as well as our recruiting team and our community liaison officer. They will be briefed on the type of volunteers we are looking for this trial. So given that this is phase 1 research, we are looking mostly at safety and tolerability as opposed to efficacy. So we will be approaching people who are not living with HIV. And in any study, there are quite stringent inclusion and exclusion criteria. And we need to bear this in mind. People need to be in general good health with no significant medical conditions. Importantly, they must be willing to use effective contraception for the duration of the trial if they are reproductive potential, because this being a phase 1 trial, we don't know the effects of the vaccine candidate on an unborn baby would be. We also need to be careful to ensure that we enroll people who do not have any significant allergic reactions to the vaccine or adjuvants in use, or any immunodeficiency. And how participants are generally recruited at our unit. So we have a very good footprint and a good relationship with community leaders in the greater Klipfontein area. We have been around as a site for 20 years this year. And what will happen is we will conduct community outreach and engagement, and this would include information sessions at our unit and at community centers. Recruitment materials such as flyers will be distributed by our trained recruiting team who are familiar with the local communities. And potential participants will then be approached in a manner which is culturally sensitive, in a manner which respects their wishes and their understanding of vaccines. And they'll be given enough time to ask questions, consider their participation. If they are interested, they will be invited to the site for a study discussion, and then we will book them for a screening visit if they wish to join. It is important to reiterate once again that the strict inclusion criteria do exist for a study, especially of this caliber, and especially since it is a phase 1 trial.
So, Yashna, do participants get paid to participate in the Brilliant trial?
People are not paid to participate in any research. People are volunteers, and we respect their autonomy in this. If a person is interested in participating, they undergo an informed consent process. So once a volunteer decides to sign the consent form and participate in research, they may leave the study at any time. We reimburse participants for the time and for the inconvenience of coming to the research center and for the travel costs, especially since we are located at Pretoria Hospital, which is about a 20-minute traveling distance from the communities where we tend to recruit our participants from. These reimbursement guidelines are strictly adhered to from SAPRA. People are not asked to join any research.
Once the trial is done and a product is found, would those who participate in the trial have guaranteed access to the product, to the fruits of this research?
Access to a vaccine or any technology, be it PrEP or HIV treatment, which has been found to be effective, should be guaranteed to the trial participants. And this is something that I am aware that the BRILLIANT Consortium will be providing. When we do conduct research sponsored by colleagues in the Global North, we must ensure that we have a post-trial access statement in place, promising that research participants will be the first to continue receiving this until it is available in the public sector.
You know, we've just come out of this big conference in Lima, Peru called R4P, and of course, lots and lots of exciting science happening. You know, there's everything from rectal douches to combination approaches of HIV prevention and contraceptives, etc., etc. There's all of these developments on the PrEP front. So with this prevention basket growing bigger and bigger, why do we still need a vaccine?
Despite the growing number of effective prevention options like PrEP, which is in use in South Africa now, like post-exposure prophylaxis, like treatment as prevention, we still need an effective HIV vaccine. So, for example, PrEP requires consistent use and persistence on the product and access to health services, which can be barriers to some people. And an HIV vaccine would be a more sustainable and potentially long-term solution that could reach larger populations, which include those with limited access to regular healthcare or people with adherence challenges. Other than that, a vaccine would, bypass the adherence requirements for oral PrEP to work effectively. So looking at a single or limited dose vaccine schedule, which may offer long-term protection without the need of a daily pill. So regarding stigma as well, a vaccine might, be seen as something more acceptable because of its association with other public health vaccines. And this may even normalize preventing HIV. And on the financial front, a vaccine has the potential to increase the financial burden on health services, especially in settings like ours, by reducing the need for people to be on lifelong ART, should it be effective. And while a vaccine may not in itself cure HIV, the long-term goal of reducing new infections hinges on the development of something effective and something that is widely accessible and something we are able to scale up with speed and with low cost.
My last question for you, what is the one thing that you want communities in South Africa to know about the BRILLIANT Consortium's work, based on all of your experience, your involvement with care of clinical trial participants, and your work across so many studies, from HIV prevention studies to, I was reading one of your quotes in the Daily Maverick, in the context of gender affirming care. So with all this diversity within which you work, what is the one message you want to leave communities with as BRILLIANT continues its work into year 2, 3, 4, and 5?
One thing that communities should bear in mind is that this is an African-led pioneering program. The scientists involved are committed to strengthening the efforts to end the epidemic, and knowing that these scientists are committed in their plight to engage also with stakeholders who know the landscape of HIV in our area. It shows that we can find our own solutions, and we are committed to lead the efforts in reducing the burden of disease of our epidemic. Just on a personal note, knowing that these female scientists, some of whom I have long admired, this gives me so much inspiration to continue evolving in my role as an HIV researcher.
That's such a powerful point. You know, a lot about Brilliant is the fact that it's women-led, African-led, and so I think it's something to be collectively very, very proud of in terms of advancing the field, which we know, you know, is quite patriarchal, and so we really to see how we begin breaking down some of these structural issues that have really characterized how research happens, who leads research, who is heard and who is seen. And of course, we count you as one of those leaders that we're really excited to work with over the next 5 years. But Yashna Singh, currently the acting site PI of the Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, Krutaskiya site for the Brilliant Consortium. Thank you so much for your time. You've been listening to the African Alliance podcast, the Brilliant series, bringing you these incredible stories of passion, innovation, and change that take us a step closer to an HIV vaccine. We're constantly inspired by the work being done by our guests, and I hope you are too. The work doesn't stop here. There's always more to learn, more to do, and more to connect with. Stay curious, stay engaged, and we'll be back soon with another inspiring episode, from pioneering scientific research to impactful community activism. The individuals we feature on this show are not just changing their fields, they're shaping the future. To learn more about the Brilliant Consortium and how you can get involved, visit africanalliance.org.za and follow us on social media. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the podcast so more people can hear these powerful stories.